Good morning, members. Thank you for arriving in time. Let's start the meeting. Item 1, information paper issued since the last meeting. The Secretariat has not issued any information paper since the last meeting. Item 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. The next regular meeting is scheduled for 4:30, the 28th of April 2025. We're going to discuss enhanced measures under the Civil Service Disciplinary Mechanism, as well as commendation and award schemes for civil servants. Any views? Right, I see members shaking their heads. So if there are no further views, these will be the two items for discussion at the next meeting. Moving on to item 3, civil service related matters featured in 2025-26 budget. We have a paper provided by the administration, and meanwhile, let's ask our staff to invite the administration to come in.
好啦，咁立法會嘅所有嘅議員都係獲邀參加今次嘅討論啦。咁如果有要求發言嘅議員同事咧，咁就而家已經可以撳掣發言㗎啦。咁我哋有請返公務員事務局局長啦，楊何蓓茵女士啦，就座先啦。好啦，咁我哋就有請。
All right, the Secretary will take the floor and walk members through the paper. 4 minutes questions and answers for the floor later. Chair, members, in the 2025-26 budget, there are civil service related matters, and these are set out in detail in the paper provided to the Secretariat, and I will give some salient points. Under the reinforced fiscal consolidation program, we will strictly control public spending without compromising public services and the efficiency. We have had regard to the views expressed during the budget consultation exercise by different sectors of the community, as well as balancing all factors. On civil service establishments, in order to optimize resources and control expenditure, we have introduced the zero growth policy in the civil service establishment since 2021-22, with the overall establishment controlled at a level not exceeding March 2021, and that's 196,000 posts. With the concerted efforts of bureaus and departments, against the backdrop of increasing workload, the civil service establishment has been reducing every year. It is anticipated by the 31st of March 2026, the overall civil service establishment will have reduced to about 193,000 posts, a reduction by about 3,000 posts on a cumulative basis. To further utilize manpower resources, we will further reduce civil service establishment by 2% each in 2026-27 and 2027-28 on the establishment. By the 1st of April 2027, about 10,000 posts are expected to be deleted from the establishment within this term of government. The resources saved will come under the productivity enhancement program, and that means the 2% savings of the recurring expenditure of the departments. This is no easy task for the civil service. As members may have noticed, the government is having more and more on its plate. So whilst controlling spending and reducing civil service establishment, we also need to have advanced planning for the work of departments. Now, this after all, it's a good opportunity for us to break new grounds by adopting innovative thinking to enhance efficiency. We will reprioritize our work and redeploy manpower, as well as streamline work processes and capitalize on tech solutions to optimize the use of manpower and enhance efficiency, so that we can continue to provide high quality public services to the citizens whilst trimming the fat. At the same time, The budget 2025-26 also proposed that for the executive authorities, legislature, judiciary, DC council members, they would take a pay freeze, and that also includes the civil service. It would take effect on the 1st of April 2025. According to the usual timetable, the Pay Trend Survey Committee had already commenced the 2025 pay trend survey exercise in February 2025. It is supposed to provide survey results to the government in May 2025 for reference. In light of the announcement in the budget, the government has decided not to proceed further with the 2025 pay trend survey. As for civil service training, in 2025-26, the estimates for training is about $255 million. We will continue to launch various initiatives to step up governance, including the Governance Talent Development Program. The college will also continue to enhance the content on technology application in civil service leadership training so that departmental leaders can have a better grasp of the impact of technological development on public policy formulation. This will help them take on leadership responsibilities and better harness technology, including the use of big data and artificial intelligence to transform public services and provide appropriate training for departmental staff. On medical benefits, we will continue to fulfill our responsibility as employers of civil servants. We will continue to provide medical benefits for serving civil servants, eligible pensioners, and other eligible persons, including the provisions for the hospital authority. Now, in relation to the provision of families clinic services and dental services, including a pilot scheme to provide dental scaling services to serving civil servants and eligible persons, as well as the scheme to allow the scaling service to be provided in Shenzhen. We've made provision to a tune of $1.158 billion. We've also set aside $1.769 billion for the payment and reimbursement of medical fees and hospital charges. The highlight of our Bureau's work is set out in the draft estimates in the 2025-26 budget. Now, in relation to the Controller's report, we will continue to take forward some ongoing initiatives such as civil service staff exchange and collaboration program with the Greater Bay Area, as well as implementing 2 pilot schemes for the provision of dental services to CSEPs and the provision of childcare leave for government employees. I'm not going to repeat other details set out in the paper in relation to the budget. But I welcome questions and comments. All right, the floor will have 4 minutes for questions and answers each. There are 7 members in line: Charles Siu-chung, Benson, Look Chen Chen, Ying Lam Chun Sing, Johnny Ng, Stephen Ho, and Michael Tin. Let's start with Mr. Zhao Siu-chung. Thank you, Chair. The Secretary has announced a civil service pay freeze for this year's budget, and that civil service establishment will be reduced by 10,000 posts. Now, I believe civil servants are quite helpless, but they are willing to join hands with the government and members of the public in tiding over the financial deficits. As you know, for a long period of time, civil service has experienced labor shortage. There is a gap between civil service establishment and the strength. So in the future, there will be a further shortage of manpower envisaged. The Civil Service Bureau should not ask civil servants to do extra on a prolonged basis, because many departments are working overtime, and this will deal a blow on the physical well-being of our colleagues. So I have a number of questions. First, on implementing this establishment reduction, will there be further downsizing of certain departments? For example, some departments do recruit temporary or contract employees. So will these posts be cut Now, the second point is that according to last year's policy address and the budget, I understand that the Digital Policy Office will be involved in reprioritizing and streamlining work processes. It's been more than half a year. May I know whether there's been any progress? The third point is about the generative AI assistance application. Now, I put a question to the Secretary in November last year. I was told that 20 departments and 800 colleagues participated in the trial. Now, it's been some time, and I have not received update information on whether actually we could save manpower at the front line. So these are the three questions. Another point I'd like to refer to is general expenses under CAP 134 or Head 134. The number has been on the rise. In fact, according to the latest draft estimates, it has gone up again by about 10%, $987.9 million. Now, I understand that this is partly due to increase in personal emolument. But there is also another item under this head, general departmental expenses. And again, this figure has been on the rise for years. May I know why? Now, the government has introduced a reduction of 1% across all departments. Why is it that despite this measure, there is still an increase in general departmental expenses? Thank you, Secretary. Let me start by explaining that indeed we have about 10% vacancy rate at the moment. But whether these posts are filled, departments are responsible for reviewing the operational needs of these posts. So if there is no operational need to keep this post, the relevant colleagues will have to be redeployed. And if the post is vacant, that means no recruitment exercise should be held. For downsizing of the civil service establishment, it's not the case that we're asking 9 colleagues to take up the work of 10. Now, after cutting 2 posts, we should resort to, say, technology. By making use of tech solutions, we should streamline work processes so as to reduce workload, or we should reprioritize the tasks. Having regard to the current situation, some tasks originally considered to be of high priority might no longer be so, and that we could allow more time for these tasks. So it's not really the case that 8 colleagues take up the work of 10. Now, I did meet with the civil service labor unions, and I told them that we are not being harsh on our colleagues. We want to have some sort of consolidation and coordination so that we can enhance efficiency. And to answer Mr. Chow's other question, the first point, first and foremost, is that we are not going to lay off serving staff. Reduction will be achieved through natural wastage or manpower review. Depending on our future work priorities, there will be a reprioritization and redeployment of manpower. The other point is that in last year's policy address, it is proposed that we work with the Digital Policy Office. It's been 6 months, and we do find that there is room to adopt more widely tech solutions for certain departments. We are now exploring, together with the Digital Policy Office and the relevant departments, on adopting these tech solutions and the rough estimates. The other point is about the large language model or the generative AI assistance program. This has been introduced across the board in the civil service. In fact, it has recently been updated. This is an AI system. We need to train the system. The more we put in, the more training they will receive so that they can generate outputs with greater accuracy and better tailored to our needs. Now, it is still at the preliminary stage. We are not able to calculate savings at this point. But we're not talking about simple math. We are not asking the computer to do simple calculations for, say, 3 clerical officers. We're talking about more complex filing duties, and that these senior colleagues may be redeployed to other duties. So we may not be able to actually slash some posts, but at least we can redeploy staff.
Chairman, will the Secretary talk about the departmental expenditure? On departmental expenditure, it covers different areas. For example, we have some IT systems which require maintenance. We need to upgrade or update these systems, which requires expenditure. Also, the Civil Service College has organized more training programs. The college doesn't have its own building yet. It sometimes have to rent premises outside of government buildings. These are all part of the expenditure. As we see prices increase and as we roll out more programs, there will be high expenditure. Mr. Benson Look. Thank you, Chairman. In the latest budget, it is announced that all civil servants will see a pay freeze. Also, 10,000 posts will be slashed. I think this is understandable. I have 3 concerns. First, in the year 2025 budget, it is mentioned that the consolidated fiscal deficit amounts to $87.2 billion. And the civil service pay freeze will help the government save $8.7 billion. I think statutory organizations or public organizations, they should also follow the practice of pay freeze. I wonder if the SAR government has instructed the public organizations to impose a pay freeze on their staff. Also, how many organizations will impose a pay freeze? Secondly, 10,000 posts will be cut within the civil service. The goal is to cut expenditure and enhance efficiency. In the private sector, if there is a pay freeze, it is often linked to the head count. If you lower the pay of junior staff, it might not help you save a lot of money. So it is only meaningful if you downsize the establishment. Apart from downsizing the establishment, would there be a KPI on the pay cut? Thirdly, moving forward, apart from downsizing the establishment, I think the government needs to get fit. We see that in year 2023, civil servants account for 4.7% of the total employment, and this is higher than that in South Korea as well as in New Zealand. Are there plans for the government to carry out a reform or carry out a study to cut spending through the natural wastage rate? Thank you. For subvented organizations, if in their formula the salary pay is, the staff salary is linked to the provision. For example, say this year, the service adjustment is increased by 3%. For subvented organizations, for the provision they get, the salary is part of their formula. For the education sector, their pay scale is packed with the pay scale of civil servants, so there will be a pay freeze for them as well. And for other types of organizations, like social welfare organizations, they get a one-off grant, and they have the autonomy to decide on the pay level of their staff. They have the right to adjust their salary downward or upward based on the actual circumstances. Now, on downsizing our establishment, it is linked with the departmental expenditure. As mentioned in my opening remarks, the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau ask each department to cut their spending by 2%, and it includes the saving we get by downsizing the establishment. If this is not counted towards the 2%, it would be hard for departments to actually reduce their spending by 2%. Of course, there are recurrent expenditure that we have to pay, so there is little room for departments to reduce their spending. So in order to meet the 2% target to reduce the recurrent expenditure, they cannot only slash junior posts. Thirdly, on whether there will be a reform within the civil service. Well, I need to explain this. In each and different countries or places, there are different definitions on civil service. A lot of times people compare us with Singapore. In Singapore, there are about 50 statutory bodies. These statutory bodies, they do a lot of work that is similar to what we do within the government. And the staff that work for those statutory bodies, they are not considered as civil servants. So we can't make an apple-to-apple comparison between the situation in Hong Kong and Singapore. There are some 150,000 people working in the public organizations in Singapore. Of them, 70,000 are civil servants. We will try to reduce civil service pay or downsize establishment. We will see what can be done within the government and what not, what can be outsourced to other organizations. But we can't make a direct comparison here because we're heading towards different directions. I have a follow-up question. Will the SAR government ask statutory bodies or public organizations to impose a pay freeze on their staff? Will you give such an instruction? Secretary. Say for aided schools, they have the autonomy to adjust the staff salary without an increase in the subvention or grants they get. I believe there is very little room for these schools to adjust their staff salary upward. But since they have the autonomy to decide on the pay, we will have them make the decision on their own. Mr. Ronak Chen, I declare that I am a member of the Joint Secretary for the Advisory Bodies on Civil Service and Judiciary Salaries and Conditions of Service. There is the instruction to hold the 2025 pay trend survey. Will this affect the survey next year? Will the pay trend data for 2025 and 2026 be announced in one go next year? say in 2026 there is a pay freeze again, then in 2027 will there be data for all 3 years be announced? Also, paragraph 10 mentions that for the Department of Health, there is provision for the pay for medical and health officer as well as dental officer grades. If the vacancies for these posts can't be filled, will the provision be set aside for other purposes? This is because you mentioned that you got saving because of vacant posts of medical and health officer grades, and you use that money on the pilot scheme on dental scaling. My third question, under Head 120, some $51 billion are set aside for pensions, and some $10.3 billion are for the MPF scheme as well as for the Provident scheme. For the hundreds of billions of dollars, you are setting aside $60 billion for the retirement benefits of civil servants. Will you set aside provisions for all the provident funds as well as pensions? If there is a high wastage rate of civil servants, you may need to end up spending less on the MPF as well as the Civil Service Provident Fund. I think you have to set aside these items or look at these items separately. For the investment return for long-term investment schemes, it is about 16%. It's quite high. And you can set aside the provisions for long-term investment with high returns, and you can use that returns generated to pay for the civil service pay. So will you think about this instead of incorporating the provision under the draft estimates of expenditure? Secretary. So what will happen when we decide on whether to carry out the pay trend survey in 2026? Now, we have decided to hold the 2025 pay trend survey, so there won't be any data from 2025 anymore. This is because we have decided to impose a pay freeze on civil servants. Some human resources organizations a few days ago said some employers would take into account civil service pay freeze as they decide on their staff salary adjustment. So it is meaningless if we carry on with the pay trend survey this year because employers may have already taken into account the civil service pay freeze. In the 2000s, we imposed a pay freeze for a couple years, and when the pay freeze was halted, we carried on with the future pay trend survey. So we will adopt the same practice in the coming years. Also, on the point about dental officer as well as medical and health officer, we use the savings from vacant posts to implement the pilot scheme on dental scaling services. If we can't end up spending so much money, we will return the money to the central department. On pensions, this is about how the government manages the public funds. I thank Mr. Ronald Chan for his suggestions. We will reflect this suggestion to the FSTB to see whether they would consider this option On the other hand, we have been monitoring the trend. You may have already guessed this already. On pensions, there will be yearly increase in terms of the expenditure on pensions. Starting from June 2000, we haven't had any government employees employed on the old term, so there will be a decrease. As for the Civil Service Provident Fund expenditure, it will continue to rise. As to how we will manage the money, we'll leave it to the FSTB to make a decision.
Mr. Lam Chen-sing, I'm concerned about trimming the establishment by 10,000 posts and its impact on public services. You have some posts that remain vacant for a long period of time, such as lifeguards, and as a result, some swimming pools have to be closed. Now, even if you outsource the work to contract staff, you need to pay a sum of money. Is it the case that the government is the public coffers are in dire situation that no contract staff would be hired? Will this affect public services such as the closure of swimming pools? The target, of course, is to slash 10,000 posts, but for some particular departments or posts where there are operational needs, perhaps you can increase the establishment by 2,000 to look after areas of needs, because my concern is that the actual strength at the moment is just 180 plus, despite the 190,000 posts in the civil service establishment minus 10,000. You also envisage staff retiring, and if you do not start recruitment exercises, does it mean that overall speaking the establishment or the strength will stand at 160,000? Will it cause a major impact on public services? Now, for civil service pay freeze, I understand that this is not up for discussion, and I appreciate the background. Still, for a decade or so, civil service pay adjustment has been made according to the net pay trend indicator in the pay trend survey exercise. But for the several years after COVID-19, the pay increase has been lower than the net PTIs. And this year, you're calling a halt to the pay trend survey altogether. Does it mean that it has completed its historic mission? Do we still need this mechanism? Because even if the civil service has a pay freeze this year, we should go by the mechanism. That is, apart from the PTIs, you need to consider 5 other factors. Well, unless, say, if according to the net PTIs, a 3% pay hike should be introduced, and that means you'll be facing a lot of pressure. This will put you in a predicament. But if it is not the real situation, that means you should go back to the civil service pay adjustment mechanism because it is helpful. And to pick up from what Mr. Ronald Chan said, there were rumors circulating online about combining 2 grades, clerical, assistant clerical officers as well as CAs or clerical assistants. Now, it's not really a non-feasible option. In February, when you answered Mrs. Regina Ip's written question, the administration said that the government does not keep the statistics relating to the trial on the AI documentation system in terms of percentage or time or manpower saved. So you're not in a position to gauge the efficiency at the moment. Or perhaps your AI system is really expensive. Perhaps in the future you should level with the public about the efficiency of this system, whether we are truly saving costs. Thank you, Chair. On the issue of vacancies, is not the case that we are calling a halt to recruitment as well. As I mentioned just now, the departments should review the operational needs of all their posts, whether they are vacant or not, and if there is no longer an operational need for a post, then the post should be deleted, and that if the post has been filled, the relevant staff can be redeployed to take up other duties. And if the post is vacant, then it can be deleted altogether. So that's how it works. And in order to maintain public services, for certain necessary posts, we do need to hold recruitment exercises. For example, for government school teaching posts, apparently, if there is a vacancy for a sports or physical education teacher, there is a need to have this vacancy filled. It is impossible not to have a PE teacher in a school. The same applies to air traffic control officer in light of the increase in the number of flights at the airport. Another example is fire station officer. Apparently, these posts will have to be filled for the purpose of maintaining public services. So it's for the departmental or head of departments to review the work and the operational needs and see whether some sort of consolidation can be taken forward. Now, if there is additional work, then there is a need for extra manpower. A good example is the airport. With the commissioning of the third runway system, there is increase in workload, and that means additional manpower. The second question is about pay freeze. Now, after we announced the civil service pay freeze, we've also decided not to go ahead with the pay trend survey for this year, because as I answered Mr. Ronick Chan's question just now, the outcome of the pay trend survey will not be as accurate after we've announced the civil service pay freeze, because as mentioned by manpower and human resources agencies, the government's decision to freeze the pay of the civil service will also affect, to some extent, the employers' decisions to offer pay hikes, because some employers understand that we usually make announcements between March and May, and very often the survey results will not be ready until April. So the employees' decisions have been affected by the government's announcement, and that this will have an impact on the pay offers. The pay trend survey results will no longer truly reflect the situation had there not been a pay freeze, so we've decided not to go ahead with the pay trend survey. Now, it is not the case that we are setting aside the mechanism altogether, because as mentioned, the methodology demands us to look at not only the indicator but also 5 other factors. And in the past years, there were occasions in which, having considered the 6 factors, the final decision was aligned with the net pay trend indicator. But there were also occasions in which we departed from the indicators. Now, about the AI documentation system, with the use of technology, I'd say that first and foremost, we should be able to reduce the manpower needs for more labor-intensive, going through the motion kind of work. And that means usually we start with trimming the lower rank staff, but that also happens to the senior rank staff as well, as we deploy more technology with precision. So be it the clerical officer grade or clerical assistant grade, there is room to consolidate the establishment. Several weeks ago, when the rumors first floated, we considered the situation, and it is not the case that we would go by what was set out in the rumors. In fact, we propose to reduce the establishment by 2%. That means we believe that some clerical work can be reduced through the use of technology. I must say that there is room for trimming the establishment further. Mr. Johnny Ng. First of all, I acknowledge the hard work of civil servants, but trimming the establishment is also what we need in light of the current trend. With technological advancements, it is inevitable. In fact, about AI, last month I read from the news that in Futian district of Shenzhen, they've started to deploy AI employees. Some 70 AI civil servants, so to speak, reported duty, covering 240 work processes in 11 areas. And they could enhance efficiency by 100 times. That seems to be really impressive. I want to know whether the government will consider exchanging the experience with Taiwan or Shenzhen and see whether there is anything we can learn from them in enhancing efficiency. Now, my other point is this. According to the revised estimates in 2024, the pension expenditure increased by $1.72 billion. That's $51.93 billion in total. For the payment and reimbursement of medical fees and charges, the figure also went up by 21.8%. And that's really a cause of concern. My question is whether the government has the means to shoulder such a big expenditure in the coming 5 or 10 years. The next question relates to short-term internship programs covering tertiary education students and university students. I know that the government encourages our young people to join the civil service. There are some 4,000 placement opportunities for them in 2 years. I'd like to know whether this program will continue and whether there are other ways to attract young people to join the government. Thank you, Chair. First of all, on the application of AI, we are discussing opportunities of exchange and duty visits. Now, within the SAR government, we also deploy technology or even AI in our work. Let me give you an example for illustration. If you go to the immigration department to have your ID card replaced or passport replaced, nowadays, we don't need somebody to man the counter. You can approach a machine and all you need to do is to have your picture taken, to key in your information. And this is a civil servant in the form of a machine and helps us process a lot of tasks. Now, AI is also deployed in different departments such as the Transport Department, Digital Policy Office, as well as other departments. They are deploying AI to analyze different weather and traffic data obtained through sensors installed at roadsides. We also have works departments using drones with AI-enabled analytic tools. These drones would access tunnels or slopes that human beings find difficult to reach for site investigation. Now, in the past, these were inaccessible spots, but now we can do our work better and with more precision. We've enhanced effectiveness and will continue to make reference to examples from other places. Let me take the final question. That is about payment and reimbursement of medical fees and hospital charges for civil servants, pensioners, and eligible persons. I must say that pension is a long-term commitment of the government, but we envisage a drop in the sum because since year 2000, new recruits to civil service are employed on the Civil Service Provident Fund terms and not on pension terms. So the long-term commitment will drop in a sense. And for medical fees and hospital charges, we provide medical benefits to civil servants through public hospitals and clinics. Only when the item is not directly covered by our provisions for the public healthcare sector will civil servants need to pay out of their pockets for reimbursement later. But we're talking about necessary items and services. With the emergence of new drugs and new medical technologies, we do envisage a rise in number. But it's hard to predict with any precision because we're unsure about new technologies and how expensive these technologies and drugs are. And as, say, some drugs get their patent or as the technologies become more popular, the overall price would also come down. So we just include a ballpark figure in each year's estimate so that there is room to make provision for contingencies, such as emergence of new technologies or drugs. Otherwise, the money would be plowed back to the public coffers. Now, for short-term internship programs, we provide internship opportunities for the executive officer grade, administrative officer grade, etc. And every year, the interns tell us that in their feedback that they find the opportunities very valuable and that with practical experience they can understand our work better and will be more interested in applying for civil service posts in the future. We also have opportunities in the form of internship and placement for non-Chinese speaking students or disabled students. Again, these are invaluable opportunities for them to have exposure to our workplace environment as they are still in school.
Next member to speak, Mr. Stephen Ho. I want to thank the SAR government. It has proposed some concrete ideas on how to cut spending. It will cut spending by 5%. It will also slash 10,000 posts. By downsizing the establishment, are you actually cutting manpower? This is a question that you'll be asked. My view is that the government should continue to review whether the posts are necessary. If you can delete 10,000 posts, it means that you should review the system. You shouldn't just do this when there is a fiscal deficit. We shouldn't give the public the impression that you can cut unnecessary posts anytime. There were some audit reports which show that the government's practice is quite outdated. For example, you have human officers issuing fixed penalty tickets. And also for some jobs, you don't necessarily have to outsource them. Will you take this opportunity as you seek to downsize the civil service establishment, talk to different government departments to see how you can boost efficiency? There was the efficiency office. You have to move with the times. The LegCo has approved funding for you to promote digitalization. Like Dr. Johnny Ng said, you can have AI civil servants. In Futian District, there were 70 AI public officers. How can you ensure that there is a level of flexibility so that you can adjust the civil service establishment? I think we shouldn't look at whether there is a civil service pay freeze. This is because some civil servants work very hard. Those hard-working civil servants should be given more opportunities. At the same time, there are civil servants that are slacking in their posts. I think the SAR government should improve in this regard. Secretary, I agree. I think there should be a regular review mechanism. Indeed, we have been reviewing the system. That's why, over the past 2 years, the current term government has been able to reduce 3,000 posts. So we've been working on this. And on top of this, we are reducing expenditure by 2% per annum. It's not like there is a fiscal deficit. That's why we realize that we need to cut spending. We're doing this on the basis of what we've been doing in the past. For example, we've been making use of technology. I gave you an example of the Immigration Department, which made use of technology and helped reduce manpower at its counters. And on top of this, we want to do more. Over the past 2 years, we've made a great stride in terms of making use of AI. For example, some members asked me about the large language model. We are making a start here, and we do think that this model will be able to help us in the future, and we want to make a greater stride from here. So we're not doing this just because we're facing a fiscal deficit. These are what we've been doing in the past. In terms of how we can boost efficiency, we've touched on this just now. Say, for example, the Immigration Department has been making use of machines, and they don't need human officers to man the counters. So where did these officers go? Take the Immigration Department as an example again. We have several talent admission schemes now, and we've got a lot more visa applications coming in. Without increasing significantly the level of manpower, how can the Immigration Department process so many visa applications? We are relying on the human officers to do so. So in one area, we save manpower, and in the other areas, we deploy manpower to take care of certain work. Even with an increase of manpower, it is not proportionate in the increase of workload we see. We have been making use of IT as well as AI to take care of different types of work. As I said just now when I replied to Dr. Johnny Ng's questions, after making use of AI, we've actually got more work for ourselves. We got work that are dealt with higher precision, and on the other hand, we are freeing up manpower to do other types of work. We've been reviewing this system all along. Of course, there is room for us to improve, and with technology, we can be bolder in terms of redeploying manpower, but this doesn't mean that we have not been doing so in the past. Mr. Michael Dean. We've all been concerned about the expenditure on civil service pay. Over the past 10 years, the annual average increase is 6.16%. 1% amounts to $3 billion. We see a salary increase of 3.36%, and that amounts to about $5 to $7 billion in the private sector. So this is the difference between the civil service as well as the private sector. Within the civil service, we've got a yearly increment for civil servants. This does not apply to the private sector. Just now, the Secretary said that this is not an automatic increment. It is an increment upon evaluation or assessment. If you look at the statistics, according to the government last year, in year 2020 to 2023, 32 civil servants fell short of their expectations in terms of their performance, and they didn't get the increment. We have over 100,000 civil servants, and only 32 civil servants were not up to par. This is inconceivable. It is like the increment system or the performance appraisal system does not exist. We actually come up with a system that can help you assess the performance of civil servants. I believe over 70 or not 80% of civil servants deserve the increment. And you're not laying off these substandard civil servants. You're just not giving them the increment. So a reduction of some 2% amounts to $6 to $7 billion. Will you try to save money as much as possible in this regard? Secretary. I agree. We could be more stringent in terms of assessing civil servants' performance. For the current term government, we have started to do this in 2023. If you remember, in 2023, for civil servants whose performance fall below standard, we asked them to retire. And we've got more of these cases. We're not just asking them to retire. Under our mechanism, 1 is the highest point and 6 is the lowest point. If you get 5 or 6 in your appraisal report, or if you get a 4 in your appraisal report, and you see that the civil servant concerned performance continue to deteriorate, we will perhaps give that civil servant a final opportunity to improve. But if we are to trigger this system, the civil servant will not get the increment. Moving forward, we'll have to review how we can be more stringent under this mechanism. I've talked to the heads of departments a number of times that they have to make an honest assessment of their staff's performance. If they give a higher score to the civil servants than one that they deserve, it's not good. It's not good for the management. It will also affect the morale of other staff who perform very well. So we've been telling the heads of departments about this. We also ask the heads of departments to not look at the length of service of our civil servants, or whether the civil servants have moved to different posts as they assess the staff's performance. Secretary. Chinese people, they do not want to be the bad people in their tradition. So, under your mechanism, there is only a pass or fail. Do you only get the direct supervisor to assess the staff performance? Do you get the input from other directors or managers? Say there is one manager who's very stringent to their staff, and you might get complaints from the lower ranking staff. Secretary. This could be the mindset of some people. We don't only have one direct supervisor assessing a staff's performance. We have a higher ranking staff who countersigns the appraisal reports. And that higher ranking officer is the supervisor of that direct supervisor. So we have a 3-tier assessment mechanism. we'll see how we can improve or how we can be more stringent. Say a manager decides that a staff deserves a promotion after assessment, but other managers do not agree. Then the manager will be very careful in assessing the staff. Do you have figures in terms of how many such cases you have come across? We see that most of our civil servants have been working very hard. For those whose performances are not up to par, well, we have these kind of staff in all kinds of organizations, even in the private sector. But this is not a huge number that we're talking about because we have mechanisms in place to monitor our staff's performance. We have the Audit Commission. We also have the Ombudsman. We're not only looking at individual staff's performance. We are looking at the overall performance of departments as well. So I do not have the relevant figures of how many individual staff in each department fall below standard. But I agree that there is room for us to improve.
Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chair. My take is this. On civil service establishment, of course, we want to trim the fat, so to speak, to enhance efficiency. And I really agree with the Secretary that it's really difficult to compare statistics with other places. This will not be a viable comparison because the situation and the circumstances are different. So it's not an apple-to-apple comparison. Well, of course, we can use them as reference and consider whether there is any room for further improvement. Now, I'd like to give the Secretary a chance to elucidate the following. Mr. Benson Look referred to statutory or public organizations. It's not part of the civil service. But the public are interested in the structure, the establishment, and the pay of some of these organizations. In fact, there have been some strong views. So, in fact, Chair, under your leadership, perhaps in due course, the panel should also discuss the relevant matter. Now, I know today's topic is about the civil service. The Secretary, can you take this opportunity to explain to us, in terms of these public bodies, especially the manpower and the structure, is it outside your purview? And Secretary also explained that these organizations have a degree of autonomy. But on top of that, they should also abide by some principles of governance. So, Secretary, can you tell us whether indeed there are guidelines and standards of governance that they should follow? The other point is this. It is said that the establishment will be reduced by 10,000 posts. The Secretary, it's impossible to take a broad stroke because different departments have different criteria. Can you tell us, in terms of downsizing the establishment, what criteria do the departments adopt respectively? My last question is about AI. I know that Secretary keeps an open mind and it is important to harness technology. It needs time to train an AI system, and an AI system cannot overtake all the civil servants. Now, Secretary, with the current civil service establishments, in order to widely adopt AI, how long do you think it would take to train the AI system? Thank you, Chair. Now, we have some public and statutory organizations such as the EHA and also the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, MPFA, etc. in the financial sector. Now, for other subvented organizations in the social welfare sector, we're talking about some aided schools and social welfare organizations. There are relevant laws setting out the governance framework for these public bodies. Some ordinances spell out rather clearly that, for example, a committee or a panel should be set up to decide any pay-related matters. Now, for subvented organizations, the situation may be a bit different, such as aided schools. Different schools operate different number of classes, and their grant is calculated on the basis of the number of classes. So if one class is added, that means more teachers, more teaching assistant, social workers, school psychologists, etc. So there is a framework to decide on the personnel matters, and each school sets up its own council. The school council also considers different matters such as revenue sources. They may receive donations, they may also have grants, they may also have other allocations. On the whole, the Education Bureau lays down a framework to decide the governance structure, the establishment, the school council, and the terms of reference of the school council. In the social welfare sector, the subvented organizations have autonomy over governance matters because of the lump sum grant system. After obtaining this lump sum, the organization in question will have autonomy over the number of staff to be hired, the structure of governance, etc. But after all, this is public money, and that means they need to follow certain rules. On procurement, for example, if it's a big project with a big sum, then they should go by tendering, or for smaller sums, they should ask for multiple quotations. They have more autonomy over these matters. Now, the other questions is about trimming the establishment. We want to cut costs by 2%, or cut expenditure by 2%, but we are not putting the same requirement to every department. We adopt the approach of using an envelope, and that means there may be different sections or units under a department. And taking this overall envelope approach, even if one of the units or sections have vacancies, there may be additional workload, and they need to consider the picture as a whole. And it's the holder of the envelope, so to speak, that is the bureau chief, who will decide on the area where the 2% savings is to be achieved. That means we call it the whole envelope approach. To answer the third question about training AI, we are developing a large language model, and it's currently being trained. Different time frame for training is required for different AI applications. Now, for works departments, for example, which use drones with AI-enabled devices to conduct investigation in areas not accessible by human beings. The time taken to train these AI robots would be very different from the large language models training time frame. Say the EPD also deploys a robot dog that can use AI to analyze the source of air pollutants. The time to train the robot dogs is different. So it's really hard to tell. Dr. So Chang Wing. Thank you, Chair. Now, I fully appreciate the government in launching a series of measures to cope with the tight financial position of the government. And I think pay freeze and trimming the civil service establishment are the way to go. But my question is this. There is a target to slash the establishment by 2% each year. What is the reason? Is it because there is no operational need, or is it only because of the urgent fiscal situation? Because if it's because of the tightening of the purse strings, then I don't think it's meaningful in terms of cost cutting, because from your paper, I understand that you have vacancies not yet filled in your establishment. So despite introducing the zero growth policy, as of the 31st of December last year, the civil service strength stood at 172,560. So that means if you trim the establishment, you will only be able to achieve this target after 6 years, so that the 20,000 posts unfilled will be deleted. In other words, you are not really cutting expenditure. And in your paper, you mentioned that there will be no layoffs. The deletion of 10,000 posts would come from natural wastage. So similar to my previous point, you're not slashing the strength of civil service. You're just cutting the vacancies. So how will you truly address the situation through natural wastage? My other question is about the Secretary's response to another member's question. When the member compared the civil service establishment in Singapore and that in Hong Kong. Now, I beg to differ from what the Secretary said. I agree that these two numbers are not comparable. Still, we should study the figures more carefully. Now, if we were going through a consultation exercise, then definitely my argument will be rebutted by the government because you have the say. So let me cite you some figures now. Secretary, you mentioned that for the civil service establishments and the statutory organizations in Singapore, the total size stands at 150,000. That's similar to Hong Kong establishment in your view, but I think this is misleading. We have quite a lot of people employed under statutory organizations and subvented organizations. If my memory serves me right, the annual expenditure for these organizations amount to some $150 billion. So they have big establishments as well. I'm not trying to argue with you. I just hope that the government will really focus on areas where there are more redundant staff. Well, I think the member was focusing on the different approach adopted in the private sector. In a private organization, the actual head counts are considered when staff pays are actually made out. But for government departments, since the establishment is very large, we have over 50 departments and over 10 bureaus, we delegate the recruitment responsibility to individual bureaus and departments. So in preparing the annual budget, we provide estimates based on the estimated establishment, and that means we make provision in our budget for departmental expenditure. And by the end of the year, if they are unable to, or if they didn't go ahead with the recruitment, then the provisions will go back to the public coffers. But as I said, since we need to provide public services, we need to either recruit our own staff or outsource the work to contract staff, or we can also make use of the money reserved for personal emoluments for permanent civil servants to hire retired civil servants on contract on a short-term basis. So in either of these ways, we need to make provisions in the beginning of the financial year because of the vacancies. Now, if the vacancies are deleted altogether, then in the beginning of the financial year, we don't need to make provisions. We're actually saving costs. In 2026-27 and 27-28, we propose to slash the establishment by 2% each year, and this will take effect starting from the 1st of April this year. That means in the coming budgets for the two consecutive years, no allocation will be provided in the estimates. Now, turning to your second question about the comparison, in Singapore, there are public organizations providing services and completing tasks usually undertaken by the government. But in fact, the model adopted in Singapore hasn't really been thoroughly discussed in our deliberations. Whereas in Hong Kong, we also have a lot of subvented and subsidized organizations doing the same. So that means no direct comparison.
Mr. Ambrose Lam, I want to write on what Dr. So said. Just now the Secretary said if the government fails to recruit people to fill the vacancies, while money has already been given to the department at the beginning of the year, well, because the relevant department fails to hire someone, the money will go back to the public coffers. Say there are over 10,000 vacant posts, and you still continue to allocate provisions to the departments, then the bond money just goes back and forth, and every year the government will still lose about $10 billion. So we end up having no differences. Now, coming back to my question, currently under the government pay scale, the different salary is based on the different posts or grades, but across different departments, there could be very different posts. Say, assistant clerical officer. At the transport department, an ACO can face a huge workload, but staff in these posts across different departments get the same salary under the pay scale. Have you reviewed the workload, the different workload for the same posts or grades across different departments? That's my first question. Secondly, it's a question about the judiciary. We always say that the judiciary is independent, but indeed, it is only independent in the sense that it gives ruling independently. I want to know if the pay freeze also applies to the judiciary, and also will the slashing of posts apply to the judiciary as well. As we all know, for a long time, we've got a 2% vacancies in judges' posts because it's been hard to recruit judges. Also, how many retired civil servants are there each year? Do they account for the 10,000 posts that you are going to delete within the civil service? Secretary. Now, the member followed up on Dr. So Chun Wing's question. First of all, say we allocate a provision to a department. The department may carry out recruitment exercise. Say a post is filled by the department, then it can use the money we gave the department. If the post cannot be filled, it will look for other ways to take care of the workload. For example, it may engage a retired officer on a contract basis to take care of the workload. So the money that was supposed to be used to hire a full-time civil servant to engage a contract staff, it may also outsource the job to outside workers. So where does the money come from? It's from the provision. It is not that the department will not be able to use the provision if the posts cannot be filled, because the service will have to be delivered. Say we have vacant posts for the dental officer grades because we need dental officers to work under the pilot scheme on dental scaling services. We do not have enough dentists within the government. Therefore, we engage the private sector. We spend the money to engage the private sector to help implement the pilot scheme for us. So it's not that we have 10,000 or 20,000 vacant posts and all the provision would not be spent and the money will be returned to the public coffers. It is because certain services will have to be provided to the public. Now, on the different types or different workload for the same post, for general grades like assistant clerical officer, as mentioned by Mr. Ambrose Lem, we have an ACO in each department. But for other posts like engineers, there are different types of engineering posts in different departments. Some of them have a heavier workload, others do not. However, we have a transferal system. Civil servants have the chance to rotate among different government departments. So that's my first point. Secondly, as I replied to Mr. Stephen Ho, I said that there shouldn't be civil servants who are not busy with their work, because each department should keep reviewing the workload of their staff. And over the past few years, we have already slashed 3,000 posts. So we should keep reviewing our staff's workload. Say for ACO, who works in the general office, he may have to do a lot of internal work. Say an ACO working for the transport department, he may have to face members of the public. If he works in the licensing office of the transport department, some ACOs, for example, as I said, they may have to do a lot of internal work. So we hold aptitude tests for our staff to see what kind of posts suit them. So there aren't a lot of unfair situations we see in the government. Now, in the judiciary, we have judges. We also have judicial officers. For the pay freeze, it applies to the executive authorities, the legislature, the judiciary, as well as the district councils. So the pay freeze will apply to civil servants as well as judges. In terms of the management of civil servants in the judiciary, we follow the civil service system. As for judges, It is up to the judiciary to manage the judges. Understand that if there are vacant posts for judges, the judiciary will have to seek the approval of the Finance Committee to create these posts if they lack judges. Now, for retired officers, the number differs every year. Over the past few years, we have about 10,000 retired officers each year. So we've got retired officers, but the posts are still there. If necessary, we may recruit a new staff to fill the vacancy, or we may promote a staff to fill the vacancy. So whether the posts are vacant or not, the head of department has the responsibility to review the posts to see whether the posts could be taken care of, say, by technology or by another staff. And if the post is no longer needed after the officer is retired, we will delete the post. Sorry, I gave the wrong figure. We have 10,000 officers leaving the government every year. We have about 4,000 retired officers every year. Now, the following members will speak for the second round: Ms. Doreen Kong, Mr. Chow Siu Chung, Mr. Benson Look, and Dr. So Chen Wing. Ms. Doreen Kong, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I have a question about public organizations. According to statistics, the civil service as well as public organizations spend more or less the same amount of money on their operations. For public organizations, it seems like there isn't a system that the government can adopt to control their expenditure. Within the civil service, however, of course, there is a system to control the expenditure. That's why the government is trying to downsize the establishment. For public organizations, they have a level of autonomy in terms of their governance. Would that be an imbalance for serving civil servants? They're all working for Hong Kong. They're all working for the community. However, civil servants may face pay freeze or even a pay cut. To be honest, if I were a civil servant, I would be quite upset. Say I have a friend working for a public organization. He may not face the same type of pressure. Secretary, how would you strike a balance here? If the government cannot interfere with the operation of public organization, but at the same time you may impose pay freeze on civil servants, how can you keep the morale of civil servants? Would it be harder for you to recruit people to join the civil service in the future? Secondly, on retiring or retired civil servants. Well, I'm not saying that the government has to engage retired officers to help take care of the workload. I think it could be a good way to help take care of the work of the government to a certain extent. However, we do want to see a team of young civil servants working for the government. Every year, the government has 4,000 officers retiring. How many of these retired officers did you engage to have them take care of the work of the government? Would that make it more difficult for you to hire new recruits?
Right, the first question is on civil service and subvented organizations. Subvented organizations have autonomy over the utilization of their grants, such as the number of staff to be hired or annual pay adjustment. Now, the grant is dispersed under a mechanism. So as I answered the question just now, one of the elements in that mechanism is civil service pay adjustment. So if the civil service has a pay freeze, then correspondingly they will have a pay freeze. So to a certain extent, there is control over the grant given to the organization. I wouldn't want to say control, not so much control, but there is a limit as to how many people they can hire or what benefits can be offered. Because the majority of funding, as I understand, for these organizations come from the government. So, be it remuneration, benefits, manpower deployment, I don't think there'll be a great discrepancy with the civil service arrangements. Because otherwise, the relevant policy bureau or government department will, of course, keep a close eye on how the grant is being used by that organization. So I can't agree with the suggestion that civil servants will be aggrieved because of the unfairness they experience. For subvented organizations, they have their own public mission. For the civil service, we have our own public mission, and we also have a different system of remuneration and benefits. So it's really difficult to compare the two systems. Now, to answer the second question, we hire retired civil servants to cope with some urgent tasks. They do not count towards the total establishment. Say if we're unable to fill the vacancy, we may hire a retiree to take up this task on a temporary basis. It does not affect our efforts in attracting young people to join the government. Mr. Chao Siu-chung, second round. In the first round, the Secretary categorically said that there will not be any layoffs. The savings will be achieved through redeployment, and that some posts no longer needed will be deleted, and the staff concerned will be redeployed to take up other duties such as calligraphists. They may be trained to become clerical assistants. Now, this is understandable. In the private sector, the responsibility of retraining falls on the shoulder of the ERB. So my question for the Civil Service College is whether they are ready, because this is not a minor task. If we aim at deleting 10,000 posts, some civil servants will need to be deployed to other departments to learn new skills. So that means training will be crucial. Is the Civil Service College ready in launching training courses for these civil servants? My next question is about Civil Service College and the statistics. In 2023, 96 training courses were provided by the Civil Service College to staff at the MPS pay scale 0 to 13 points. But I don't see any course related to new technology or innovation. There are also 500 regular training courses for civil servants at MPS point 14 to 33, and about 10% or rather 12% of these courses relate to technology and innovation. Now, as we promote digital government, are these figures really tallying with the government's objective? For clerical grade staff or general grade staff, they have general skills and they are subject to transfer to other posts. So if they are deployed to other new posts, there should not be a need to retrain them. Whereas for departmental grades, if there is a need to deploy the staff elsewhere, then the departments in question will be responsible for providing training. As for the next question, I will give the floor to the head of the Civil Service College. Now, the member asked about training courses for civil servants at the MPS 0 to 13. Now, for staff of this rank, there is limited, there isn't a substantial need for them to acquire IT skills. In fact, our philosophy of training is this. We start with the leadership levels, and that means the leaders have to be aware of the new technologies and how the technologies can apply to their scope of duties. So the first task for us is to train them so that at the working level they can apply technology to their work, and that means a bottom-up design. They need to build application platforms, for example. The second step is for the leaders to promote the adoption of technology and innovation across the department in their work processes, and there will be a shift in culture. Now, the fourth point is that based on the professional needs of individual grades, we also encourage the adoption of tech solutions and innovation. The Civil Service College is a central training institute. It is impossible for the college itself to provide training to each and every staff, including the technical training courses. That is not the optimal use of resources, and that is why we do provide more tech-related courses and innovative courses for staff with MPS 14 points or above. It is not true, however, to say that we do not provide any tech or innovative training for lower rank staff, because we have an e-learning platform. And on this e-learning platform, we provide relevant training materials that are regularly updated. This should cater for the needs of different civil servants. Right, several members would like to speak. For the first round, Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chair. We appreciate the need to maintain public fiscal viability, and we also like the civil servants to adopt more widely artificial intelligence and digitization. The civil service establishment stands at 190,000, but the strength is short by 20,000. Especially for frontline discipline services, there is a labor shortage. Now, in this year's budget, it has been announced that the establishment will be further trimmed. I want the administration to explain clearly whether it involves a reduction in the strength or in the establishment, and also staff at which rank will be subject to the reduction. Is it lower rank or more senior ranks? I suppose for senior ranks, they have quite a heavy workload, and they also need to steer the department. Now, I'd like to have more information, because when it comes to digitization, the progress hasn't been very satisfactory in the past few years. I give you an example. Every quarter we receive the demand note for government rent and rates. Can we go paperless? As for other government bills, likewise. I think you should make bold moves and go digital to reduce manpower needs drastically. So, can we roll out more measures to tackle the fiscal deficit? I'm also concerned about the provision of public services. There are still services that demand physical staff to handle. Now, in fact, for the home visit permit, in the mainland, the application can be processed electronically without the need for any staff involvement. So can we do the same in Hong Kong so as to save resources? Now, I want to emphasize first and foremost that we reduce the establishment, not the strength. But in the budget, we make provisions for the expenditure of these posts, so we need to reduce the establishment. As for what ranks of staff will be involved, that depends on the individual departments, whether it's middle rank or low rank. But as I answered before, we are not worried that only staff at the lower ranks earning low pays will be laid off, because in order to achieve the 2% savings target, it's impossible just to delete lower rank posts. It cannot be achieved by cutting low rank posts alone. So we will invite the departments to conduct a comprehensive review and consolidate manpower. To answer the third question, many counter services are now replaced by electronic services, such as the Immigration Department. I already gave you this example. And on top of that, say if you want to apply for a vehicle license with the Transport Department, you can do that online as well. In fact, for rates and government rent, as you mentioned, we have already introduced e-bills a long time ago. But many members of the public still prefer the paper form, so we also allow demand notes to be sent in a physical form. Now, for public services, we will not compromise quality. As I said in my opening remarks, however, there may be a need to reprioritize our tasks. Now, in the past, there may be pledges to complete certain tasks in a short period of time, but in light of the current situation, there may no longer be an urgent demand for these services. And that means we need to reprioritize our work so that perhaps for these services I mentioned, there may be a longer waiting time, but on the whole, the waiting time should not be lengthened. Mr. Tony Chair. Undoubtedly, the government has done a lot in optimizing human resources and ensuring fiscal viability. And this year, the government has ramped up this effort to introduce a pay freeze and reduce the civil service establishment. I thank the civil servants for understanding the situation and helping our society tide over the difficulties. But I have a number of reminders for you, Secretary. The first is about harnessing technology in order to achieve manpower savings. I hope that the department will consider the matter comprehensively. In some situations, even if one of the procedures goes paperless, in the end of the day, you may not be able to achieve manpower saving. So you spend money on technology without actually saving manpower costs. And in these instances, the government should rethink. For example, you may have electronic application forms. But after filling in the form electronically, the reply comes in a physical paper form. So don't take a piecemeal approach to innovation. You should make sure that the whole work procedure can go paperless in order to achieve manpower saving. That's the first point. The second point, as I mentioned, you should make sure that there are carrots and sticks. Earlier, I mentioned making use of the increment system. I know that this is a systemic issue, that it can't be achieved overnight. Still, we should make the first move. You have some hardworking colleagues and some not doing so much, and this may affect morale and effectiveness. I also have friends in the civil service. We all want to do good. Now, Secretary, I think you answered the question before. What civil servants will be subject to the suspension of increments? Well, you already replied that the figure is on the low side. That shows that on the whole, the civil service is performing quite well. But individually, there are circumstances in an individual civil servants who should work harder to improve their performance. So can we raise the appraisal standards to meet public expectations? So, Secretary, can we remind the appraising officers to do something about the appraisal thresholds? You have a grading system from A to E, but nowadays, perhaps what used to be regarded as a D should now get downgraded to an E. For public organizations, this is often their consideration. It is impossible for everyone to get the same grade.
Secretary, I thank the member for the suggestions. The Civil Service College will provide training to our management and educate them how to make good use of technology. Now, on the carrot and stick approach, I agree that there is room for us to improve. We will see in what areas we can improve our carrot and stick system. Mr. Benson, look. My first question is about the short-term internship programs for tertiary students. In 2023, the government and public organizations recruited 4,000 interns from universities. In year 2024 and 25 to 2026, there have been 4,000 short-term internship placements. This is great because internship opportunities are crucial for young people, and these are great opportunities to train up the new blood. And I believe these internship opportunities account for a small amount of expenditure for the government. Given the current fiscal deficit, will the government undertake not to reduce the number of short-term internship placements for university students? Now, on training for civil servants, I noticed that the SAR government at the government headquarters held a talk on President Xi Jinping's thoughts on culture. And also, for the past 2 days, there have been seminars on the two-session spirit. I hope the middle and higher ranking officers can learn about the national policies. I think this is important. We currently have about 170,000 civil servants. Is it that each civil servant has already attended courses, talks, or programs on national education or national security? Secretary, we try our best to keep the 4,000 short-term internship placements. I can't make an undertaking here because we don't know what kind of fiscal situation we will face in the future, but I agree that the internship opportunities have been yielding results. I will defer to the Civil Service College to address your other question. We have over 100,000 civil servants, and for each level of civil servants, they require different training, which is related to the nature of their work and the assignments they are given. Is it that all 170,000 civil servants need to receive training on national policies and national affairs? Well, I don't agree. From junior to senior staff, we emphasize one thing. At different levels of their work, civil servants need to understand the depth of our national policies as well as the strategies of our country. We need to broaden their horizons, and they need to have different perspectives at different levels. For junior staff, which account for the largest number of our civil servants, they don't need to devote so much time on this kind of training. But does that mean they don't need to learn anything about national policies? Well, over the past year, we ask all civil servants to receive training on national security. We ask departments to send their staff to attend national security exhibitions. Also, on our online learning platform, we have information about national security, the Constitution, as well as the basic law, so that all civil servants can, through this platform, learn about all these. Lastly, I want to say that learning about our country and learning about national security is the obligation and responsibility of not just the civil servants, but all members of the public. And there are many ways for you to have access to this kind of information. You can do it through your mobile phone, and as you travel or as you spend money in the mainland, you can also obtain this information. It is not that you can only through formal training have access to this. Dr. So Chun-Wing. I want to follow up on what the Secretary said as she replied to my questions. She tried to correct some of the things I said. On the point about establishment, the Secretary said if certain posts can't be filled, the relevant departments could still use the provision given to engage other kinds of staff. The government has not been able to fill all the vacancies within the civil service, and this increases the workload for some civil servants. I agree that the workload is huge, and a lot of civil servants feel overwhelmed. Mr. Chao Xiu-chung said 8 or 9 civil servants have to handle the work of 10 people. you are lacking 20,000 civil servants. And as you said, necessary services still need to be provided, and departments concerned can resort to other means to engage other staff to take care of the work. For the short-term staff that you engage, are they included in the establishment? Do departments use the provision given for the establishment to hire these contract or short-term staff? Now you have an establishment of about 190,000. And the secretary said if the money is not spent, the money will go back to the public coffers. In year 2024, you had 20,000 vacant posts, but provision was allocated to departments to engage staff, and how much of this provision was spent? Also, the secretary did not answer my following question. For civil servants who have retired or who have left the government, are there policies in place to deal with the vacancies? It is now 12:41. I'll extend the meeting for 15 minutes. Secretary. First of all, we have contract staff, we have non-contract staff, we also engage retired officers to work for us, and all these staff do not count towards our establishment. Say we have 20,000 vacant posts. Can we engage non-contract staff to fill all these posts? No. This is because for certain work that involves confidential information, we cannot engage non-civil servants to take care of the work. Also, it is not always easy for us to engage contract staff to fill all the posts or requirements. So this is just a stopgap arrangement. For some departments, they do not engage contract staff. Instead, they distribute the additional workload among the existing staff. So there are different ways for us to deal with the vacant posts. The member asked how much of the money is not spent and was returned to the public coffers. Well, it's hard for me to answer this question because, say, in year 2024 and 25, we saw a difference between the draft estimates as well as the revised estimates. It could be because certain vacant posts could not be filled, and the departments concerned did not end up spending the money given. There being no further questions, we'll wrap up this discussion item. Thank you, Secretary and her team. Secretary, please stay behind. On any other business, well, I want to report to members that I noted that the Futian District Government has recently introduced AI digital employees to assist public officers in handling their work. I suggest that this panel find a day in May to visit the relevant organizations in Shenzhen to learn about how AI is utilized to support the administrative work of local public officers. I've talked to the secretary about this, and the secretary promised that she would join the duty visit and that she would liaise with the relevant parties to come up with an itinerary. I want to see if members agree that we should have such a duty visit to Shenzhen, and I want to consult members on whether we should invite members not from this panel to join the duty visit. I agree. A very firm support from Mr. Tony Che. Well, if members agree, we will work out the itinerary as well as the date with the relevant parties, and we will invite members to join the duty visit. A paper will be drafted for the approval of the House Committee. Now, there being no further business, meeting adjourned. Thank you.